Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. So today's concept that I've dreamed up is going to be albums that divide opinion, essentially. I might call it the wild card in the pack or something like that. This came about from me listening to this record last night. This is Yes and Relayer, a record that I've had in my collection for a long time, on CD and on vinyl. Never really got to grips with it hugely, it's got to be said. I listened to it on the record player last night, and by God, what a strange album it is, what an intense album it is. On side one, the track, The Gates of Delirium, I mean, it's possibly one of the most difficult pieces of music I own in my collection. You know, just very, very dense, very noisy, quite unpleasant sounding at times, very shrill, just that classic pile driving thing that Yes did, but taken to real extremes. Just everybody playing all at once, balls to the wall. Sometimes you just think, you know, is this planned? Is this composed? Or is everybody just playing their own thing, just madly, just, you know, intent on their own vision? I think it's meant to be a bit of an evocation of war. You might even be able to hear cannons or gunfire going off. It really is an extraordinary piece of music. I'm not entirely sure if I like it or not. But I've been watching a couple of Yes rankings videos. I watched Andy Edwards' one, and then John Pickles. It was great to see back making videos again. He did a response. I think they both put Relayer quite high on their lists. And in the past, I've seen Relayer quite high on people's Yes rankings list. I've also seen it quite low down as well. And that got me thinking about this concept of these kind of wild card in the pack records where you see a ranking video, you never know where it's going to come. Years ago, I did a video on mid-table records. These are the records which always seem to be sort of mid-table, you know, names on the tin really. You know, they're never up the top end, they're never down the bottom end, but they always seem to come to rest. So this is not that. This is something a bit different. This is the records that do tend to divide opinion, so you just never know whether they're going to come top or bottom, and they do tend to come either really near the top or near the bottom, depending on what people think of them. But they very rarely kind of achieve that sort of middling ground. So I've got a few to show. I don't think it's quite 10, it's maybe 8 or something like that, and I've picked these sort of trying to stay true to the spirit of it, but see what you think. You might not agree with all of them. The first one you might have a surprise when you see what it is, but I think this, with the Beatles, is a bit of a wild card in the pack record in terms of how it's received, how it's viewed. I've seen lots of people put this video really high up in their list and say it's a really brilliant second album. By the same token, I've seen quite a few people place it really low down as well. So you see it really above, you know, Please Please Me, the debut album, or you see it really below. Obviously, sometimes it does come mid-table. I'm not saying that none of these records ever come mid-table, but I do think this record seems to polarize opinions. I think maybe because it's got a kind of mixture of covers, as the first album did. The sound is more advanced, but it's just, I mean, to me, it probably is a better album in a way. It's got some really tremendous original tracks on, All My Loving, It Won't Be Long. But I suppose the cover versions, I think I've heard it said that the cover versions on this record are not as good as the cover versions on Please Please Me. I don't know what it is, it's just this record for some reason just seems to divide opinion. And for that reason, I'm going to have it as the Beatles wildcard in the pack. Beatles for Sale, actually, I could have had as well. Generally speaking, that one comes quite low down, though. I don't see people putting that one high up very often. Now, for the Rolling Stones, I think this was the only one I really thought would fit the bill. And again, you might be surprised by this. You might think of Exile on Main Street as being a record which generally floats to the top of people's rankings, but in my experience, the ones I've watched over the years, I've watched an awful lot of ranking videos on YouTube over the last 10 years, and I see this record very rarely comes mid-table. People either have it really high up in the top 3 or 4, along with Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers. Quite a few people have it top of the list. By the same token, I see it sort of not at the very bottom of the list, because clearly it's never going to come down there with Dirty Work, but I've seen it lower than mid-table. I've seen people slagging this record off, saying that it's murky, it's difficult to listen to, it's bloated, it's just got too much stuff on it. Last time I heard it, actually, I played it on CD probably about 2 months ago while I was doing some housework, and I found it quite tiresome after a while. I did find it a bit padded. It's got some tremendous stuff on it, but I definitely had enough by about 3/4 3/4 of the way through, which is interesting because I'd always had this in my mind. I'd always had this at being near the top of my Stones list. It wouldn't be near the bottom. So, you know, I'm not sure about this. Maybe this would average out as a mid-table record, but I've definitely seen people put this one quite low down, and I've definitely seen people put it very high up. So I thought I'd have that. Pink Floyd, which one am I going to show? I did have a couple of contenders for this one, but I've gone for this one in the end. Atom Heart Mother, which was not very popular with the band themselves. They didn't like it. They'd seen it as a failed experiment. I see people nowadays, actually, I see more people praising this album. It tends to come higher up nowadays than it ever used to. I think it's sort of risen in people's estimation, the last few Floyd rankings I've seen. But I definitely have seen it floating down near the bottom as well. There are some people who don't like this record. You've got the sort of very overindulgent on side 2, Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, I think is a little bit much for some people, understandably. Side 1, of course, has got the great epic Atom Heart Mother, which is not particularly well recorded, the orchestral piece, but it's got some good moments on it. A couple of really good songs on side 2. You've got If by Roger Waters, which is a bit of a Floyd classic, really. Fat Hill Sun by Gilmore is really good. And Richard Wright's song, actually, Summer 68, is pretty good as well. I think it's a really good album. I can't remember where I had it when I did my Floyd rankings video years ago. It does feel like the Joker in the Pack, or the wild card in the pack, this one. It's not part of the original run of a couple of really good, strong psychedelic records. It's not medal yet. You know, they haven't reached that kind of plateau, the pre-Dark Side plateau. They're kind of stranded in the middle, really, trying to find their way. It's a bit of a feel your way record, I think, and for that reason, maybe it does divide opinion. I think so, anyway. Atom Heart Mother. Right, Queen. I did have 2 contenders for this. I nearly chose A Day at the Races, which I have seen very high up and very low down in people's rankings videos. In the end, I went for this one. I think jazz, again, a bit like the Floyd one, this one has risen in people's estimations. I've definitely seen it high up. I've also seen it quite low down as well. If you're just looking at the 1970s records, if you don't count the 80s ones, because most Queen rankings videos that you see have all the 1970s ones high up and then the 80s ones lower down, generally with Hot Space at the bottom and whatever, you know, Flash Gordon. But if you just take the 1970s ones, you will often see jazz at the bottom of the heap, pretty much. But it also has its fans as well. And I do think it's a bit of a wild card in the pack record, this. It's all over the place. It's got lots of different styles of songs on it. The big hit, Don't Stop Me Now, which is not a huge hit at the time, but it's come to be revered as one of the biggest Queen songs ever, really. Bit of a mishmash of stuff on here, though. Fat Bottom Girls and Bicycle Race were the other 2 singles, of course. But a real mixture of stuff. You know, a couple of quite weak Roger Taylor songs on here, more of that jazz and funny. You know, Dreamer's Ball by Brian May, a bit of a minor piece, really. The John Deacon tracks are not wonderful. Jealousy is a good track. I don't know. It's not a high-ranking one for me, but I do see it ranked high and low. Therefore, I'm going to put it in the pile. So, Queen, jazz. Right, where would a video from me be without a bit of Paul McCartney and Wings? So, it's Wings. See if you can predict which one I'm going to show. This is definitely the Wings wildcard in the pack record, I think. Back to the Egg, their final record from 1979. I see lots of people showing this one as a favourite. Andrew Brooks, here on the Beatles vinyl community, it's his favourite album. A couple of other people that I've seen have had it number 1. It's risen in stature over the years, but quite a few other people have it quite low down. I've definitely seen ranking videos where it tends to not be mid-table. It does tend to be either up there or down there. And I suppose it's a bit of a split screen album, this. Half of it seems like it's straining to be a kind of new wave, you know, McCartney's answer to punk and new wave, and then the rest of it is just ballads. It's just got a real split personality. No big hits on it, really. A couple of really nice tracks on side 1, Getting Closer and Arrow Through Me are probably the strongest songs. A few nice moments on side 2, but it seems to drift. This is, you know, purely my opinion. As I said, lots of people really, really do rate this album. I know John Heaton really rates it. It's quite high on John's list, I think. I think partly because maybe it was a new band, it was a fresh influx of energy after London Town, which had maybe been a little bit sleepy. So it definitely has its fans, and I think it's not really a mid-table record. It's definitely either up there or down there. Back to the Egg, Wings. And then this one, I wasn't too sure about this one, but I thought of the artist, and then I thought, I wonder if he has one. I nearly chose Punch the Clock, but in the end I did go for King of America. This one I think divides opinion. You have Elvis Costello fans who are just very, very, very fond of his early sort of new wave records, you know, Armed Forces and This Year's Model and Trust, that great run of early records. By the same token, you have people who perhaps take a broader view of Costello's career. Later on, he was going to do more albums like this, but this was really the first time he'd done it, if you don't count the covers album he did, Almost Blue. This was his first big sort of Americana album, really, where he wrote all the songs. And some people just don't go with it. You know, they just don't like the fact that he'd moved away from that very British, clipped kind of mod sound, striving to be a bit more rootsy, a bit more reflective. Lots of slower songs on this record. On side one, you've got that great run of slow songs, Indoor Fireworks, Little Palaces, I'll Wear It Proudly. Great trio of stuff there. Brilliant Mistake and American Without Tears are really fantastic songs. Suit of Light towards the end. Jack of All Parades. It's got some tremendous stuff on it. Maybe a bit of filler. Stuff like Lovable and Glitter Gulch are not wonderful, are they? Eisenhower Blues is a bit ordinary. Poison Rose, perhaps not so great. Too long, probably. Maybe just too much stuff. A little bit indigestible. But I have seen this ranked very high up on Costello lists, as in, you know, number one. I've also seen it quite far down. If you just count those first, maybe, I don't know what it is, maybe 10 or 12 records, this one, I've definitely seen it coming quite low. So there we go, King of America. And then another one which, I don't know about this one. I'm going to have it because I wanted to talk about it, but Flick of the Switch by AC/DC, I think, is a bit of a wild card in the pack record. I think for the simple reason is that most people rate the Bon Scott albums high and the Brian Johnson albums low, apart from Back in Black, of course, which often tops lists. But Flick of the Switch, it does quite often come quite high up in people's lists. You will see it sometimes coming ahead of some of the Bon Scott records, maybe ahead of Dirty D's Done Dirt Cheap. And I think it's because it just has a very, very raw, powerful sound. It was the first one they did after they parted company with Mutt Lange in about 1983, something like that. It was a self-production. I think it was the first time they'd produced themselves, maybe. As in without their brothers being involved. I could be wrong. But it's just very raw. It's got a very raw, visceral sound. The songs, there's nothing really that jumps out at you, just in terms of being a kind of hook-laden pop rock song. It's not very radio-friendly. It has a great raw quality, which the next couple of Brian Johnson albums, well, they got more raw, but they got more ragged, really. You know, Fly on the Wall, a couple of those later 80s ones like Blow Up Your Video. The songwriting was starting to slip. It was all starting to get a bit tired, really. This record's got a certain energy to it, I think, a certain attitude. So therefore you will often see it coming quite high in people's lists. But by the same token, it will often come quite low down too, just by dint of the fact that it's a Brian Johnson album and not Back in Black. So there we go, Flick of the Switch by AC/DC. And to finish, a record that I know for a fact comes high on some people's lists and very low down on other people's. This is a twofer, but we'll go with Sweetheart of the Rodeo, which I think is Headley, another fat bearded man talking about records' favourite Byrds album, and I've got a feeling it's Lionel Richie's least favourite one. And so there we go. But I think I've seen that, you know, repeated across the board a little bit. I think because it's the Byrds' completely pure country album, didn't seem to have much to do with what had gone before, the Graham Parsons sound coming in again. It's just one of those records which, obviously, if you're a big country fan, a big country rock fan, you're going to absolutely love it. If you're more of a fan of the kind of folky acid folk Byrds, then it's maybe not going to be your thing. So I thought that one definitely qualified. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any suggestions, and let me know if you think I'm just barking up the wrong tree altogether with those. I don't know. The idea came to me. I thought, okay, let's try and do the video. Why not? So there we go. I've done it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.